Hey, welcome back. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and forget exactly why you went in there? Now imagine walking back to an entire town, a whole community of people you left behind, and finding it completely empty. Not a soul in sight. No signs of a struggle, no hurried goodbyes. Just silence. And a single, cryptic word carved into a tree. That's not a fleeting moment of forgetfulness. That's a mystery that has echoed for over 4 centuries. I'm Ibnul J. Farabi, and this is Hidden Histories, the Untold Files. Today, we're diving into one of America's oldest and most haunting puzzles, the vanishing of the Roanoke colony. It's a story that feels less like history and more like the opening scene of a supernatural thriller. In 1587, a group of about 115 English men, women, and children, led by a man named John White, landed on Roanoke Island, off the coast of what is now North Carolina. They were there to establish a permanent foothold for England in the New World. But things were tough from the start. Supplies were low, and tensions with the local Secotan people were high. So, just a few months after arriving, Governor John White was persuaded to sail back to England for more provisions and reinforcements. It should have been a quick turnaround. But history, as it often does, had other plans. White's return was thwarted by the grand spectacle of international conflict. England's entire fleet was mobilized to fight the Spanish Armada. Every seaworthy ship was commandeered. For 3 agonizing years, John White was stuck an ocean away, desperate to get back to his daughter, his granddaughter, the first English child born in the Americas, a little girl named Virginia Dare, in the colony he'd left behind. Finally, in 1590, he managed to secure passage on a privateering ship. You can imagine his anxiety, his hope, as they approached the island. That hope would curdle into sheer dread. When he and the landing party arrived at the settlement, they found the houses carefully taken down, not destroyed, but deliberately dismantled. The fort was empty. There were no crosses carved, the prearranged sign for distress. It was orderly, but utterly devoid of life. The only clues were 2 carvings. On a post of the fort's entrance, the word Croatoan, and on a nearby tree, just Ciaro. Now, this wasn't a panicked scrawl. John White himself noted it was carved in fair Roman letters. This was intentional, and it was the one thing that gave him a shred of hope. You see, Croatoan was the name of a nearby island, home to a Native American tribe who had been friendly to the English. It was also the agreed-upon signal. If the colonists left, they were to carve the name of their destination. But here's the first twist. They were supposed to add a Maltese cross if they were under duress. There was no cross. So, logically, they'd gone to Croatoan Island voluntarily. The mystery should have been solved right then and there. But a storm was brewing, literally. The sailors on White's ship were privateers, more interested in chasing Spanish treasure than a missing colony. The weather turned foul, and they refused to sail the short distance south to Croatoan Island. They turned the ship and headed back out to sea, leaving John White staring at the receding shoreline, his family and his answer just out of reach. He never returned. And just like that, the 115 colonists passed from history into legend. They became the lost colony. So what happened to them? The word Croatoan is our only real artifact, our only file in this untold case. And over the years, historians, archaeologists, and amateur sleuths have proposed theories that range from the plausible to the utterly bizarre. Let's walk through the main ones. The first, and most likely, is assimilation. The colonists, facing starvation and isolation, split into smaller groups and integrated with local Native American tribes, like the Croatoans or the Roanoke. This wasn't uncommon. Later English explorers in the 17th century reported encountering Native Americans with gray eyes, European features, and knowledge of Christianity. Some even claimed to be descendants of white people. The carving, then, was exactly what it appeared to be, a forwarding address. Then there's the darker theory, annihilation. Perhaps the colony was attacked and wiped out by a hostile tribe or by the Spanish who were operating up from Florida. But this doesn't fit the evidence John White found. There were no bones, no signs of violence, and the settlement was meticulously deconstructed, not burned or ransacked. A massacre leaves a mess. This was a planned departure. And of course, we can't ignore the more outlandish ideas, that they tried to sail back to England in a small boat and were lost at sea, or that they were victims of a supernatural event. But as an engineer, I'm drawn to the evidence. And the evidence points to that carving. Croatoan. It was a message. It was meant to be found. So why did no one follow it for so long? That's the part of this story that really gets under my skin. It speaks to a fragility we don't often consider. Here was an entire community, a bold experiment, a tiny speck of England's ambition. And its fate hinged on the timing of a storm, the priorities of a ship's crew, and a war happening across an ocean. The thread connecting them to the world was that one ship, and when it sailed away, the thread was cut. It makes me think about all the other stories, the other files, that were lost simply because the messenger didn't arrive, the letter wasn't delivered, the one person who knew the truth took it to their grave. There's a modern coda to this story that I find fascinating. In 2012, researchers examining a map John White himself drew, known as the Virginia Pars map, found something incredible. Using modern imaging techniques, they discovered a tiny, hidden patch on the map. A correction. Beneath that patch was the outline of a fort located not on Roanoke Island, but about 50 miles inland, on the mainland at the confluence of two rivers. This has led to a compelling new hypothesis. Perhaps the colonists didn't just go to Croatoan Island initially. Perhaps that carving was a stopping point, and their ultimate plan, known to John White, was to move inland to that more secure location. The patch on the map might have been meant to hide that strategic information from the Spanish. So they left the message, moved to Croatoan, and then eventually joined with or became the settlers at this inland fort. It's a theory that beautifully marries the clue with a tangible, hidden location on a centuries-old document. It feels like the kind of breakthrough we dream of on this show, a literal hidden history, revealed by a shadow on a map. The story of Roanoke endures because it's an incomplete sentence. It's a question mark carved into the very foundation of American history. We have this overwhelming human need for closure, for answers. We want to know what happened to Virginia Dare, to Eleanor White, to every nameless carpenter and farmer who stepped onto that shore with hope. The word Croatoan is a promise of an answer, but one that was, for centuries, impossible to collect. Maybe they assimilated and their descendants walk among us today, completely unaware of their legendary origins. Maybe their story ended more tragically. We may never know for sure, but that's why we keep looking. That's why we sift through the maps, analyze the tree rings, and listen to the oral histories of the Lumbee, people who claim descent from the lost colonists. The file on Roanoke is never truly closed. It reminds us that history isn't just a record of what we know. It's also the silent, haunting archive of all that we've forgotten. Thank you for listening to this episode of Hidden Histories, The Untold Files. If this journey into America's oldest mystery gripped you, please share it with a fellow history sleuth. For more deep dives into the shadows of our past, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. This is Abnul J. Farabi, signing off. Until next time, keep questioning the story you think you know. This podcast is a production of Light Knot Studios. Visit us at lightknotstudios.com.